So I am admittedly a little bit late to this game. It happened on Sunday. It is now Friday, so I've kind of missed the initial window of interest for this game, which is too bad, but I still want to talk about it because I think there's just a lot of really interesting implications to come from this match. Starting with the fact that it was played on Sky Sports, which is a really big deal for the women's pyramid in England because it's kind of underdeveloped in this country right now, and that's not really the fault of the women's game. Like, the FA effectively banned women's football for 50 years, so it's not surprising that they're only now kind of starting to find their own. The National League, like, women's football kind of came into its own a bit in the 90s and had a structure of a top league and everything, but it's still going to take a while for that to really show its fruits throughout the rest of England. And the women's pyramid is at a pretty good place right now, and we're seeing a lot more interest in the women's game that there hasn't been before. But still, there's only 24 teams in the top two tiers before we get to regional leagues. And there are even actually only 11 in the championship this year. But that being said, the fact that this game was on Sky shows that there is growing interest in the women's game, and this is the first time they've ever shown a championship match on Sky, who dominate the UK sporting market. So that is huge. And it was kind of a perfect storm because London City and Birmingham both had a shot of promotion on the final day. You know, it's not very often that you get the top two teams playing on the final day with the title on the line. It's hard enough to have the title go down to the final day, but to have both teams clearing each other and both of them able to win promotion still is a really big deal. And you just don't see it often. The only other time I can really think of this happening was in the men's game when Arsenal played Liverpool on the final day in 1989 with the league title on the line. I'm sure that other instances of this occurring are out there. I just can't think of any off the top of my head. But it's exceptionally rare. And London City came into this game. They were playing in Birmingham, but they knew that with a draw, that would be good enough to see them go through, win the league, and get promoted to the WSL. There's only one promotion spot right now, so it's pretty hard to get promoted. Meanwhile, Birmingham City could win the game. They had to win, but they were playing at home in front of 9,000 strong at St. Andrews, so they had a chance. I hadn't really gotten into the women's game until recently, like past few years recently, so I didn't immediately realize just how successful Birmingham City have actually been in women's football. They have a lot of pedigree. They've won the League Cup, they've won the FA Cup, finished WSL runners-up twice, and even have a Champions League semifinal on their resume, but they've kind of fallen behind recently. That being said, this was a chance for them to kind of shake off that past and create a new future with a chance at WSL promotion. Meanwhile, London City are an incredibly unique club right now in the women's game. Not to say that there aren't independently run women's football clubs in the English pyramid, but there used to be a lot more competing at the highest level. And this season was actually the first that none of the clubs in the WSL weren't associated with a men's Premier League team. So independent women's clubs have kind of fallen behind recently because they can't really compete with the resources available to the clubs who are also run in association with men's Premier League clubs. After all, the Premier League is the behemoth of sporting entertainment. Like, no one else gets close to them in terms of global audience. Really, only Spain can compete with El Clasico, but your average Premier League game week is still getting like 1 billion viewers worldwide. So, you know, you can't really compete with that when you've got these financial giants and you're an independent women's club. But London City have an advantage over most because they have Michelle Kang, who has recently become a pretty big deal in the women's game. She is a rich owner who took over Washington Spirit, just bought stakes in Lyon, and bought London City Lionesses when they were on the brink of going out of existence, and kept them alive and built them into a team that got into the WSL and might one day even challenge for titles. So, incredibly interesting story with London City. And that was the stakes heading into the game, where it was understandably a little bit cagey in the first half. I think that London City were the better side for the most part, but they didn't create too many like really, really good chances. Birmingham City, despite having less of the ball and less of the chances, actually seemed to, for the most part, have the better chances. Uh, so London City went into halftime knowing that a draw was good enough, so they would have been promoted if the game had stayed 0-0, but it was better for them to score. And if you're struggling to score by building up, you might as well just launch the ball from distance and see what happens. And that was what happened with Goodwin scoring a great goal and putting London City into the lead. And very quickly it got better for him because they scored on a corner kick not that long after. So even though they hadn't scored from any like build-up play or anything, London City were winning 2-0. They'd figured out how to score even if they were struggling from open play. They just launch it, they get a goal off a corner, and they're up 2-0, and they are cruising on their way to the WSL. Birmingham City, though, did not go out without a fight. Soon enough, they had made it 2-1, and before you know it, it is 2-2. It was, I guess it was later in the game. It was 86th minute. It was actually a pretty nice finish. It wasn't like a pacey shot or anything, but the way she struck it, it kind of like floated over the defense and into the goal. Nice finish from a throw-in. London City would probably be frustrated in the manner they conceded, but now they have to see out a result, and they just about do. London City are now in the WSL. And as I mentioned before with Michelle King, London City are an incredibly unique club. I really like their kits, but I actually am not a massive London City fan. I don't know. There's just something about the club that feels a bit fake, and maybe that's a bit harsh, but like it kind of just feels like Michelle Kang is the club almost, and her being like front and center for the trophy celebrations don't help that. And I like how they've gone about things. They actually seem to be fairly smart and pragmatic. They're not just immediately going out and buying global superstars. I mean, they did buy some fairly big names, but they were aging names, and they were primarily building a team that can survive in the WSL before they think about doing anything else. And they're planning to make like training facilities that can match some of the other WSL teams who have the advantage of association with men's Premier League clubs. Like they've definitely been pragmatic and smart with it. And it would be interesting to see an independent women's club compete and even go for league titles. I just feel like London City, to a degree, have kind of spent their way to the top, and they feel a little bit fake. And maybe I'll get some heat for that. And if you disagree, please do tell me. I don't know, something about them just feels like they just are they're a plastic club almost. And I hate to say that because they do have an interesting story with breaking off from Millwall nearly going out of existence. They're not quite like Leipzig or Hoffenheim, but they might be a bit like Wrexham, maybe, where they got this big flashy owner and that has propelled them to great things, and yet that may leave a few people upset. I think I am happy to see an independent women's club make it to the WSL, but I feel like I'd rather see Durham be that club who makes it than London City. But again, you can tell me what you think, and if you disagree with that, there seems to be quite a lot of support for London City, so that might be a bit of a controversial statement. Either way, it's going to be really interesting to see what London City can do in the WSL. And to say it one more time, they're such a unique and intriguing club. So the future looks bright for them, and it's just going to be really interesting to see what they get up to next season.